had no idea my wife was hiding this until the truth hit me like a bombshell. My name is Adam Crawford, and I live in the heart of London. At 42, I've carved out a life in the business world, making deals that left my name in boardrooms and my face in newspapers. But beneath that glossy veneer, a storm was brewing, one I never saw coming. I work as the managing director of a successful manufacturing firm that I helped build from the ground up. My life was supposed to be a perfect blend of hard work, family, and the occasional luxury. I lived in a penthouse overlooking the city, and I had Sally, my wife, by my side, or so I thought. It all started with a strange phone call. It was a Friday afternoon. I was getting ready to head home early, something I rarely did, but I felt compelled that day. The buzzing of my office intercom broke through the silence. "Mr. Crawford, there's a lady here who insists on seeing you," my secretary, Colette, said. "Who is it?" I asked, my mind already elsewhere. "She says it's urgent, sir." I sighed. "Fine, send her up." I thought it was another one of those charity cases, or perhaps another sales pitch from someone hoping to get their hands on a piece of my fortune. 5 minutes later, a woman walked into my office. She was tall, mid-30s, with sharp features and a purposeful stride. She wasn't the kind of person who would cower in a room like this. "Mr. Crawford?" Her voice was steady, but I could tell there was something weighing heavily on her. "That's me," I said, looking her over with curiosity. "My name is June Parsons. I'm from the Social Services Department," she said, her words carrying an unexpected weight. I could tell by her discomfort that she wasn't accustomed to places like this. The office, so modern, so pristine, had probably left her flustered, but she carried herself with a quiet confidence that made me wonder what exactly she was here for. "How can I help you, Miss Parsons?" I asked, feeling a little bored. She looked hesitant for a moment before pushing a letter across the desk. "This letter, it's from a woman named Hannah. She has 2 children and she tried to take her life. She left this note behind." I picked up the letter, recognizing the name instantly. Hannah, a name from the past, a name I never thought I would hear again. The letter began simply enough. "Dearest Adam, I never thought I'd have to write these words, but the truth needs to come out." I stopped reading for a second, my pulse quickening. The memories came flooding back. Memories I buried a long time ago. 11 years ago, I had met Hannah. She wasn't like anyone I'd ever known. She had a spark in her eyes that I couldn't ignore, a fire I never expected to encounter. But life had other plans for us. I was married to Sally back then, and our family was everything to me. But I had a secret, one that neither Sally nor anyone else knew about. I'd met Hannah when I was supposed to be working late in one of our smaller offices outside of the city. What started as a casual conversation between 2 lonely souls turned into something more. We were both in the same boat, drowning in work, unable to connect with the people we should have been close to. Slowly, we grew closer. What started as friendship turned into something deeper. Hannah was someone I could talk to, someone who understood the pressures I was under. But it was never supposed to go further. Then, just like that, she disappeared from my life. I never heard from her again, and I thought I would never have to face the consequences of our brief relationship. Until now, I read the letter with growing disbelief. "I'm sorry for what happened between us all those years ago. I couldn't bring myself to tell you the truth then, but I'm ready to now. Those 2 girls, they're yours." I felt the ground beneath me shift. My mind raced. Hannah, the woman I'd shared a brief affair with, had children. And now she was in a hospital, her life hanging by a thread. But the more pressing issue was the fact that those children, those twins, were mine. How could this happen? How could I not have known? June watched me carefully as I absorbed the shock. Mr. Crawford, we need to talk about what happens next. The girls are in foster care for now, but if you want to claim them, you need to act fast. The mother's condition is grave, and she's asked for you specifically. I could feel my chest tighten. This wasn't just about a business deal or a social service case anymore. This was real life, my life. I had a wife, I had children, and now I had 2 more children I never knew existed. How was I going to explain this to Sally? I stood up abruptly, the letter still in my hand. Where are they? I asked. We're going to take you to see them, June said quietly. But first, we need to figure out what you're going to do with this information. If you want to be in their lives, you're going to have to move quickly. My mind was spinning. I couldn't make sense of it all. But I knew one thing for certain. I had to see those girls. I had to find out the truth. I followed June to the car without saying a word, the weight of the letter still heavy in my hands. I didn't know what to do with the bombshell I had just learned, nor how I was supposed to make sense of it. But one thing was certain. My life was about to change forever. June didn't speak during the drive. The car was silent except for the occasional sound of the tires humming on the pavement. I had too many questions, too many things I needed to understand, but I couldn't seem to form a coherent sentence. My mind kept replaying the letter over and over again. Those 2 girls? They're yours. I had always believed that Sally and I had a perfect marriage, a perfect family. The idea that I had 2 daughters out there that I knew nothing about, it was almost impossible to process. How could this happen without me knowing? How could I have been so blind? June pulled up in front of a modest-looking house on the outskirts of the city. It didn't look like much, but as I stepped out of the car, I realized how quickly I had been sucked into a world I never imagined I would be a part of. A world where secrets festered in the dark corners of the past. As we walked up the driveway, I could hear the faint sound of children laughing inside. My heart skipped a beat. These were my children. 2 little girls who had no idea who I was. But somehow, I had been connected to them in ways I never expected. The door opened before June had a chance to knock. A woman in her mid-40s, dressed in casual clothes, stepped aside to let us in. Hi, you must be Mr. Crawford. June told me you were coming. Thank you for taking care of them, I said, trying to steady my voice. The woman smiled softly. They're good girls. They've been through a lot, but they're strong. You'll see. We walked through a small hallway, and there they were. Kay and Heather, 2 identical 10-year-olds, were sitting in the living room, playing with a puzzle. They looked up as we entered, their eyes wide with curiosity. Girls, this is Mr. Crawford, June said gently. He's here to take care of you for a while. I knelt down in front of them, my heart pounding in my chest. They both stared at me with suspicion, their small hands clutching the puzzle pieces tightly. They didn't know who I was. How could they? Hi, I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm your dad. Kay's eyes widened. Dad? She whispered. Heather blinked, clearly confused. But Mommy said you weren't our dad. I swallowed hard. I know this is a lot to take in, but I am your father. I didn't know about you until just now, but I want to help you, and I want to take care of you. There was a long pause as the girls looked at each other, their young faces filled with uncertainty. Finally, Kay spoke again, her voice small. Are you going to take us away from Mommy? No, I said quickly. I'm not going to take you from her. I just want to make sure you're safe while she's in the hospital. And when she's better, we can figure out what happens next. But for now, I'm going to look after you. The girls didn't seem convinced. They were still processing what I had said, still unsure of what to make of me. And I couldn't blame them. How could they trust a stranger? someone who had been hidden from their lives for so long. June looked at me with a hint of sympathy. "I think they'll need some time," she said quietly. "This is all new for them." I nodded, understanding. The past few hours had been a whirlwind for me, and it was clear that the girls were going through their own storm. "We should get going," June added. "I'll drive you back to your place. Can stay with them for a while to make sure they settle in." I stood up, looking down at the girls once more. "I'll be back soon," I promised, though I wasn't sure if I was making any sense. I wasn't even sure of what I was promising them. But I knew one thing. I couldn't walk away from this. These girls needed me whether I was ready or not. The drive back to my penthouse was just as silent as the one before. I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. These two little girls were my daughters, and I had no idea how to be a father to them. I barely knew anything about their lives, and yet here I was, expected to take on a role I had never prepared for. When we arrived, June took the girls upstairs to their room while I sat in the living room, lost in thought. My phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a text from Sally. "Where are you?" I stared at the message for a long time. I couldn't bring myself to answer her. How could I explain this? How could I tell her that I had just discovered I had 2 children with another woman? And how could I tell her that I wasn't even sure what I felt about it? The truth was, I was angry. Angry at Sally for hiding this from me. Angry at myself for not seeing the signs. But most of all, I was angry at how my life had been turned upside down in the blink of an eye. The night dragged on. I couldn't shake the feeling that something more was going on here. Something deeper than just a betrayal. There was something I wasn't seeing, and I knew that eventually, the truth would come to light. But for now, I had to focus on the girls. They needed me, and I had no idea what to do next. The following days blurred into one long string of tension and confusion. Kay and Heather were adjusting in their own way to the idea that I was their father. But the truth was, I wasn't adjusting. I was reeling. Every time I looked at them, I was reminded of the woman I had once been foolish enough to trust. Sally. How could she have hidden this from me for so long? Why didn't she tell me? I couldn't understand it. Every time I tried to reach out to her, every time I called, the line went dead. It was like she was avoiding me on purpose. The girls were quieter than I expected, which only added to the unease I felt. They spent most of their time in the guest room watching television or reading. I tried to engage with them, tried to make them feel at home, but they were too guarded, too cautious, and I couldn't blame them. They didn't know me. At night, I lay awake in my penthouse, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts of everything I had learned in such a short time. My whole life had been built on lies, I realized. The woman I had loved, Sally, had been lying to me for years. And now, 2 little girls, my daughters, were caught in the mess that had unfolded. On the 4th day after the girls arrived, I got another unexpected visitor. It was June. She showed up at my door without warning, her face unusually somber. "Mr. Crawford, we need to talk," she said, stepping into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. I led her into the living room, sitting across from her on the couch. I couldn't help but notice how tense she looked, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "What's going on?" I asked, bracing myself for more bad news. "It's about Sally," she said, her voice low. She's been hiding something from you, something important." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "What now?" June took a deep breath before continuing. "The truth is, there's more to the story than you think. The affair between Sally and Robert, well, it's not just about betrayal. Sally has been lying about more than just your children. She's been manipulating the situation from the very beginning." I stared at her, confusion and anger rising inside me. What do you mean? June hesitated. When Sally found out about the affair, she didn't just get angry. She started planning. She knew Robert was going to ruin your marriage, but she also knew that he was after something more than just revenge. Robert knew that you were the key to something much bigger. My heart skipped a beat. What are you talking about? June leaned in closer. You've been caught in the middle of a power play, Mr. Crawford. A corporate game between your company and Johnson's. Robert, Tony, and Sally have been working together to get rid of you, to sabotage your position in the firm. Couldn't breathe. You're telling me this was all some kind of plot? Yes, June replied softly. Sally was never as innocent as she seemed. She didn't just fall into Robert's arms. She was part of the plan all along. I stood up abruptly, my mind spinning. This couldn't be happening. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my life, it was all a lie. The truth hit me harder than I could have imagined. But why? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Why would they do this? Why would Sally do this to me? June's expression softened. Sally was never happy, Mr. Crawford. She was never content with the life you built for her. And Robert, he's always been about power. He wanted control over your company. He wanted your position. He knew that if he could manipulate you, if he could drive a wedge between you and your wife, he'd have a better chance of taking everything you've worked for. The room seemed to close in around me. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all. The betrayal from Sally, the manipulation by Robert, it was all too much to process. But one thing was clear. Everything I thought I knew about my life was shattered. I need to talk to her, I said, my voice shaking. I need to know the truth. June stood up slowly. I don't think that will be possible right now. Sally is in a fragile state, but I'll help you get to the bottom of this. There are people who want to see you fail. And Sally, she's been playing both sides this whole time. I felt a surge of rage. I won't let them get away with this. June put a hand on my shoulder. You don't have to do this alone, but you need to be careful. Robert and Tony are dangerous. They've been playing this game for a long time, and they won't hesitate to destroy you if it means they get what they want. I looked at June, her words sinking in. I had been living in the dark for so long, but now the truth was starting to come to light, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right, I said, my voice steady. But I need to start with Sally. I need to confront her. The next morning, I made the call. I had to see her. I had to hear it from her own lips, the truth about everything. I needed to know why she did this to me, why she betrayed me in the worst possible way. When I walked into the hospital room, Sally looked nothing like the woman I once knew. She had changed. Her once vibrant eyes were now dull, her face pale and drawn. She looked up when I entered, and for a moment, there was a flicker of recognition in her eyes. But it quickly faded, replaced by something else. Fear. Guilt. Adam, she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't think you'd come. I stepped forward, my heart racing. You don't get to do this, Sally. You don't get to hide from me anymore. She opened her mouth to say something, but I didn't give her the chance. Why, Sally? I demanded. Why didn't you tell me about the girls? Why didn't you tell me they were mine? Sally's face crumpled, and for the first time since I walked in, I saw a tear slip down her cheek. I was scared, Adam, she whispered. I didn't want to lose you, and I didn't want to lose the life we built. I was afraid you wouldn't want me anymore if you knew the truth. I stood there, stunned. The woman I thought I knew, this wasn't her. This wasn't the woman I married. You think this was about losing me? I asked, my voice cold. You think you could keep me in the dark forever? You were playing a game, Sally. A dangerous game. And now, it's all falling apart. her eyes filled with regret, but it was too late for apologies. I had already made up my mind. "I'm done," I said quietly, turning away from her. "This marriage, this life, we're done." As I walked out of that hospital room, I knew one thing for sure. There was no going back. The days after my confrontation with Sally were a blur. Everything I thought I understood about my life, my marriage, my career, it was all unraveling in real time. Sally's confession had cracked open a door to a world I never knew existed. A world where I was nothing more than a pawn in someone else's game. I didn't sleep much. Each night, I lay awake in the penthouse, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past few days. The lies, the betrayal, the crushing realization that I had been blindsided by everyone I trusted. And then there were the girls, Kay and Heather, my daughters, who were still adjusting to the idea that I was their father. I wasn't sure what kind of parent I could be to them, but I knew one thing for certain. I would never let them be caught in the crossfire of the chaos that had consumed my life. I didn't have time to figure everything out, though. I had a company to run, and Johnson's was waiting for me to make my next move. The situation with Robert and Tony was heating up. They were on the verge of doing something desperate. I could feel it, and I had no intention of being their next victim. That evening, I received another message. This time, it wasn't from Sally. It was from Paul Johnson, the CEO of Johnson's, a name that had haunted me since I first stepped into this mess. "We need to talk. Tonight. It's urgent." I wasn't in the mood for more corporate games, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. If Paul Johnson was asking to meet, it was because things were about to get a lot worse. I arrived at the upscale restaurant where Paul had asked to meet. The ambience was dark and intimate, the kind of place where business deals were made under the guise of casual dinners. Paul was already seated, his glass of wine untouched, his face serious. "Adam," he said when he saw me approach, "I'm glad you could make it." I sat down across from him, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Cut to the chase, Paul. What do you want?" Paul took a deep breath before speaking. "I know things have been difficult for you lately, but I think you need to understand something bigger than just your company or your marriage." I wasn't sure I was ready for whatever he was about to drop on me, but I braced myself anyway. "The truth is, your company and mine are more connected than you think," Paul continued, his voice low. "And the brothers, Robert and Tony, they've been playing you. The entire thing with Johnson's was set up to fail from the start. They knew exactly what they were doing. They thought they could bring you down." I sat back, my mind reeling. "What do you mean? How could they?" "I'm not saying this to hurt you, Adam. I'm saying it because I want you to know the truth. Your life has been manipulated from the very beginning, and you've been the target all along." Paul's words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I couldn't process it. I didn't want to, but I had to. If there was one thing I had learned over the past few days, it was that everything I thought I knew was wrong. Paul leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "The brothers know you have something they want, something they've been trying to get their hands on for years. It's your company, Adam. They're trying to take it from you." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What are you talking about?" "The shares," Paul said, his voice cold. "The shares your father left you. The ones you never knew about. The ones that make you the majority shareholder of Johnson's. They're trying to force you out because they know if you hold on to them, they'll never get the control they want." I could feel the walls closing in around me. All this time, I had been fighting for my company, my family, when in reality, I was fighting for something much bigger. Something I had no idea was even at stake. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. Paul shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Because I wasn't sure you were ready to hear it." I'm not your enemy, Adam, but I can't let the brothers ruin everything. They're not fit to run this company, and I'm offering you a way out." I stared at Paul, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The idea that my whole life had been a setup, that my marriage had been manipulated, that Robert and Tony had used my relationship with Sally to destroy me. It was too much to bear. "What are you suggesting?" I asked, my voice low. "I'm offering you a chance to take back control," Paul said, his eyes intense. "We can work together. I can help you remove the brothers from the company, but it'll take everything you have. You'll have to make some difficult decisions, but in the end, it'll be worth it." I felt the weight of his words settle over me. I didn't know what to do. My first instinct was to refuse, to walk away from it all and let the pieces fall where they may. But I knew I couldn't do that. Not when I had so much at stake. Not when the girls were depending on me. "I need time," I said, my voice strained. Paul nodded, his face softening. "Take all the time you need. But remember, this won't wait forever. If you don't act soon, it'll be too late." When I returned to the penthouse that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pushed into a corner. The stakes were higher than ever. My company, my family, my future, it all depended on the choices I made in the next few days. As I walked through the door, the silence in the apartment was suffocating. The girls were in their room, still adjusting to their new life. I could hear their quiet voices as they whispered to each other, their uncertainty hanging in the air. I needed to be strong for them, but I didn't know how. The final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but I wasn't sure I was ready to see the full picture. The days that followed the dinner with Paul Johnson were tense. I spent countless hours running through strategies, weighing my options, trying to figure out the best way to take back control. But no matter how many times I went over everything, there was always one thing I couldn't shake: the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. I was still missing something. It was the night before I was supposed to make my decision, and I was sitting alone in my penthouse, staring out over the city, when the doorbell rang. I hadn't been expecting anyone, and the timing felt off. I stood up, heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure if I was ready for another round of bad news, but something told me this was different. When I opened the door, I was met with an unexpected sight. It was Sally, standing there on the threshold, looking fragile but determined. Her face was pale, her hair unkempt, and there was an air of quiet desperation around her that I hadn't seen before. She had always been the strong one, the one who controlled the narrative. But now she seemed broken. "Adam," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I need to talk to you. Please." I didn't know what to say. The betrayal still stung like a fresh wound, but as I looked at her, I saw something in her eyes, something that made me pause. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "After everything you've done, you think you can just walk back into my life?" "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, her voice trembling. "I made terrible mistakes, and I have no one to blame but myself. But there's something I need to tell you, something you need to know before it's too late." I stepped back, allowing her inside, though I couldn't quite suppress the surge of anger that rose in my chest. She had destroyed everything. Our marriage, our family, my trust in her. It was all gone. But there was something in her eyes that kept me from slamming the door in her face. She sat down on the couch and I followed, my eyes fixed on her. "What is it? What could you possibly have to say that would make any of this right?" She took a deep breath, her hands shaking. "The twins, they're not yours, Adam." For a moment, I didn't understand. I stared at her in disbelief, the words not quite processing in my mind. "What do you mean? You said, 'They're not your children,'" she repeated, her voice filled with regret. "I lied. I lied about everything. The affair with Robert, that was just a distraction. The real reason I pushed you away is because I knew the truth. I knew the twins weren't yours, but I didn't want to lose you, so I let you believe they were. I felt like the ground was pulled out from under me. But I saw the letter. It said they were mine. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I wrote that letter, but it was a lie. I couldn't bear to tell you the truth. The twins, they're Robert's. My mind reeled, couldn't breathe. The betrayal ran deeper than I ever imagined. Sally hadn't just been hiding the truth about the children. She had been hiding the truth about everything. The lies, the manipulation, the web she had spun around me. I never wanted it to come to this, she continued. But Robert, he knew everything. He played me. He made me believe he was the answer to all my problems. But in the end, he was just as selfish and manipulative as everyone else. I sat there, speechless, unable to process what she had just told me. The man I had trusted, the man who had been part of the conspiracy to destroy me, was the father of my supposed children. It was too much. I felt sick, betrayed in a way that was beyond anything I could have imagined. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice hoarse. After everything, why come here now? Because, Sally said, her voice breaking, you're my last chance. You're the only person who can stop this. Robert and Tony, they think they've won, but they haven't. If you don't act now, they'll take everything. I stood up, pacing the room, trying to digest everything she had said, but it was like trying to piece together a broken mirror. Every time I thought I saw the full picture, it shattered again. I don't know what to believe anymore, I muttered. You have to believe me now, Sally pleaded. You have to believe that I never wanted any of this. I was just too scared to stand up to Robert. I'm sorry, Adam. So sorry. I turned to her, my heart pounding in my chest. I had a choice to make. I could either let this all consume me, or I could take control of my life again. I wasn't going to let Robert and Tony destroy me, and I wasn't going to let Sally use me as her scapegoat any longer. I'll handle it, I said, my voice calm, but resolute. I'll fix this, but you have to stay out of my way. I'm done with the lies, Sally. I'm done with all of it. As I walked toward the door, I glanced back at her one last time. You've made your choices. Now, I'm making mine.